Alright, this lesson is going to be about plants, and we're going to do both plant phylogeny and plant parts in the same lesson. Hopefully I won't run out of time with this. Plant phylogeny is all about tracing the taxonomy of plants, and the first group of the plants is known as the bryophytes, and it's kind of cut off here. Bryophytes is at the top though, right here, so I've underlined bryophytes. The bryophytes are the mosses. And I put a picture of a moss down here so that you can get some idea of what they look like. Mosses are plants which lack vascular tissue, so these are called the non-vascular plants. Now, vascular tissue is listed here. Vascular tissue is a series of tubes that's going to carry water and nutrients around the plant. Because the bryophytes don't have this vascular tissue, these are teeny little plants. So here's what they look like. They have to grow right on top of water or right on top of the soil because they have to move things through osmosis. They're not capable of moving things around the plant through a series of tubes like other plants are. These guys also use water for reproduction. They actually have a swimming sperm that swims from the male parts of the plant to the female parts of another plant. And so, again, another reason why they have to be small. Alright, so that's the first group. The next group of plants are the ferns and the fern allies. These are the first plants that are going to have vascular tissue. So because they have that series of tubes, that means they can be much larger. So they can carry water, they can carry it to all the plant parts. They reproduce using spores, and spores contain the baby plants. If you look at, here's a picture of a fern, if you were to flip that fern over when it was getting ready to reproduce, you would notice these little sacs on the underside. These are called sori, and those sacs contain the spores. All right, the next group is the first group of seed plants. These are called the gymnosperms. Gymnosperm literally means naked seed. These produce seeds that are not surrounded by a fruit. So seeds are an advantage because they contain not only the baby plant but something called endosperm, and endosperm is important because it's a food supply to get the baby plant started. When the plant first emerges from a seed, when the baby plant first emerges from the seed, it doesn't have any chloroplast, or chlorophyll, excuse me. It has chloroplast, but its chlorophyll takes time to develop, and because of that, it needs a little food supply to get it started until it can start doing photosynthesis. These are also the first plants to produce pollen, and we've mentioned before that pollen is the plant's sperm. It's released from the male part of the plant, which is the small cones that you saw on the picture on the page before, and wind or water carry the pollen to the female cones, which are the larger of the cones that you also saw in the picture before. So these are also often called the coniferous plants or the conifers because they produce their seeds inside of cones. The advantage that the seeds have, obviously, is they've got some food supply to get the baby plant started, but also seeds are attractive to animals. So seeds can actually be dispersed further, and usually in a number of different ways. They can sometimes have membranes on them that can be picked up by the wind. Seeds can be carried by water, but also then animals carrying the seeds in their digestive tract. If the animals eat the seeds, some of the seeds have a tough seed coat that can break down inside of the animal's digestive tract. And when the animal goes away and deposits the seed, it's deposited in poo, which is fertilizer for the baby plant. So it doesn't damage the baby plant, it simply helps the baby plant along. Also, if you have a dog that you've ever let outside and they come back with all these burrs on their fur, those are seeds as well. And again, the whole point here is to spread out if you're a plant, because if you're a plant, you're planted. You can't move from place to place. So if your seeds just drop next to you, then what's going to happen is your children are going to be in competition with you for the food and nutrients in the area. So what you want to do is send your seeds out so that your kids are not in competition with you. All right, the next group of plants are the angiosperms, and this is the plant that most of us think of when we think of plants. This is the most diverse and complex group of plants. These produce their seeds inside of a flower, and then the ovary of the flower, which is this part down here, swells up and becomes the fruit. Okay, so the fruit is going to contain more endosperm. Okay, so what you're eating when you eat fruit is the ovary of the plant and the endosperm that it has produced, and then you'll notice the seeds are inside. So any plant part that contains seeds is botanically defined as a fruit. So as I was mentioning before a second ago, the fruits contain more endosperm. Fruits are also then really attractive to animals, which means animals like to eat fruits and again carry and disperse seeds even more than you would see in the gymnosperms. So fruits are an advantage to the plant, even though they produce or they take a lot of energy to produce. It's well worth it to the plant to go ahead and produce the fruit because either A, an animal's going to carry that seed away in its digestive tract, or B, the fruit will get the baby plant started. All right, so that's our progression. The next thing I want to talk to you about is the parts of the plant. Okay, so plant parts, and there are 3 organs of the plant besides the reproductive organs, and we've talked about the reproductive organ now. The flower is the organ for reproduction in angiosperms, the cone for gymnosperms, and the sori for the ferns, and then the bryophytes they produce separate organs as well, and those you don't really need to know about. Okay, so plant parts, you have stems, okay, you have leaves, and you have roots, and these are all organs. So stems are the part of the plant that are supposed to support the plant, give it structure, but also to lift these leaves up as close as possible to sunlight. Okay, that's what the point of stems are. All parts of the plant are going to contain vascular tissue, but they have a lot of vascular tissue which runs up and down the plant to carry water from the roots up to the leaves and carry the sugars that the plant makes down to the rest of the plant. There are 2 types of vascular tissue. There's phloem and xylem, and you may be asked about the difference. These are listed on your leaf structure diagram that I gave you back when we talked about photosynthesis. Remember the phloem, I told you to think of flow down. Okay, so phloem carries sugars that are made from the leaves down to spread them out to the rest of the plant. Xylem is the tissue that's going to carry the water up from the roots. Okay. Leaves, broad and flat mostly, unless you're talking about a needle-shaped leaf like you'd see on a pine tree, but mostly they catch the maximum amount of sunlight and do most of photosynthesis. Remember, any green part of the plant can do photosynthesis, okay? But most of photosynthesis is done at the leaf. And then finally you've got roots, and roots are going to absorb water and nutrients from the soil. They have tiny root hairs on their surface to increase the surface area for absorption, so they can absorb more water. What you do need to understand is there are modified versions of stems, roots, and leaves. So, for example, a potato is an underground stem that's modified for storing starches for the plant. Carrots are modified roots that are modified for storing starches as well. You also sometimes have modified leaves. If you look at a cactus, the spines on a cactus are actually modified leaves, and that's because you don't want to have a broad, flat leaf in the desert, because that broad, flat leaf would lose a lot of water. So you could die if you had that and you lived in the desert and you were a plant. All right, finally, this is describing the phloem and xylem here that I've just talked about. And then don't forget about pollination. This just describes pollination here, and we've talked about that before, so I'm going to skip talking about it now, but just go back and look at what we've discussed with pollination.